Okay, this will be I think the last year on Arvus. There's still one more aspect I want to discuss about Kol Yisrael HaRav Zeloseh, which is an outgrowth of the law of Arvus, and that is the special complications, although this is not the season of it, of reading Megillah. Now let's remember a few basic ideas. Although Mikra Megillah is a mitzvah saseh shezman grama, it's a rabbinic commandment that is limited in time because it's only on Purim, or Shushan Purim, but the halacha is it's one of the exceptions that women are chayavos in Mikra Megillah. Women are obligated to either read the Megillah or hear the Megillah. Just like Kiddush is an exception, Megillah is an exception, and the reason is, the Gemara says, Af hein hayu bioso hanes, that women too benefited from the miracle of Purim, that they were saved, their lives were in danger, and therefore that overrides, the svara of Af hein hayu bioso hanes overrides what would otherwise be the exemption of mitzvah saseh shezman grama. So it would seem that just as the case of Kiddush, men and women are equal, Megillah, men and women are equal. So now, here's the question. If men and women are equal, can a woman read Megillah for a man? Can a woman be motzi a man in Kriyas HaMegillah? Now, I'm not talking about, minyanim without a mechitza. I'm not dealing with all the kolisha problems. I'm dealing with husband and wife. Husband has laryngitis. Husband can't go to shul. Husband's jaw is wired shut. Can his wife read the Megillah for him? Okay, so factor out all of the extraneous things of kolisha, mechitza, tznius. That's not the question. But the question is, husband and wife at home, can a wife read a Megillah? Now remember, can a wife make Kiddush for her husband? For sure she could. For sure she could, because she's equally chayiv. The discussion we had yesterday, which I'll come back to, is if the man davened or the woman davened, then you have to come into Arvus. But let's assume a situation where wife didn't hear Kiddush and husband didn't hear Kiddush. A wife could make Kiddush for her husband. So one would argue, therefore, a wife could read Megillah for a man because she's chayeves. Now, what if the wife was yotzei already? Could she read it for her husband? So that would be the machlokes we looked at yesterday between the Dogol Mirvava and Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Because once I was yotzei, the only way I could be motzi you is through the principle of Kol Yisrael HaRav Zeloseh. So according to the Rosh, ein arvus benashim, a woman does not have arvus. According to Rabbi Akiva Eiger, a woman does have arvus on a mitzvah that a woman is chayiv in. So, b'kitzer, the pashtus would be the following. Can a woman be motzi a man or her husband in Mikra Megillah? Answer, if she was not yotzei yet, for sure. If she was yotzei already, this would be the machlokes, the Dogol Mirvava and Rabbi Akiva Eiger, how to understand the Rosh who says ein arvus benashim. I hope this sentence made sense. Okay? Everyone understands. Okay. So this would be the pashtus, meaning the pashtus would be, once again, if the woman was not yotzei yet, for sure she could be motzi the man because she's mechuyev b'davar. If you're mechuyev in a mitzvah, you could be motzi somebody. She's mechuyev. If she was yotzei, you get a problem of arvus, right? We discussed that yesterday. So far, so good. But Taisus and Maseches Megillah brings the shita of the Baal Hilchos Gedolos. That's the Bahag, one of the Gaonim, that says that even though women are chayavais, they're chayavais in Megillah, they cannot be motzi a man. And that's very difficult. We know for Kiddush, if a woman is chayeves, she could be motzi. Right? A woman can't be motzi a man in shofar because a woman's not chayev in shofar. But on a mitzvah that she's chayeves, right? The Gemara says by benching, if a woman is chayeves in benching deoraisa, she could bench for a man if she's chayeves deoraisa. So what type of svara would it be that even though the Gemara says women are chayeves in Mikra Megillah, they're chayeves, the Bahag says a woman cannot be motzi a man. Right? That's inconsistent with the general rule that if you're mechuyev in a mitzvah, even without arvus, if you're actually mechuyev in a mitzvah, you could be motzi another person. So it's a difficult Bahag. It's difficult to understand. The Shulchan Aruch, in fact, brings both dayas. The Shulchan Aruch brings the Bahag that a woman should not be motzi a man or cannot be motzi a man. Doesn't explain the reason. So there is a Sefer Marcheshes. And again, I'll say a few words about it because Marcheshes was a very big guy, but he's not so well known today. Marcheshes, which actually means by korbanos, when you make a mincha, so one of the ways you can make a meal offering is in a deep fried pan. So a marcheshes is a word that means a deep pan. So he was saying that his Torah was deep, marcheshes. Marcheshes was a man who was called Rav Chanach Eges, who died in the Holocaust, and he was the chief dayan of Vilna in the time of Rav Chaim Moser Grodzensky. Rav Chaim Moser Grodzensky was the Gadol Hador. He lived in Vilna. But Rav Chaim Moser Grodzensky, because he was kind of the Gadol of Klal Yisrael, was actually not so involved in paskening the local problems of Vilna. Vilna was a big city, but Rav Chaim Moser was international, so to speak. So his right-hand man, who handled mikveh and erev and all the kashrus and shchita, all of gittin, all of the things that were going on in Vilna, was Rav Chanach Eges. So he was a very, very big Talmid Chacham. Rav Chaim Moser trusted him, and he was kind of handling Vilna while Rav Chaim Moser was dealing with Klal Yisrael. So Rav Chanach Eges, who died in the Holocaust, wrote a Sefer of Chidushim called Marcheshes. And in the Sefer of Chidushim, he offers a beautiful, brilliant explanation of why the Bahag holds a woman cannot be motzi a man, even if she is chayav in Megillah. And then he actually has a very big chiddush where he actually says she could be motzi him at night and not during the day. It's a chiddush in the Bahag that the Bahag's din is only going to apply to the daytime reading of Megillah and not to the nighttime. And his point is the following. His point is that when Chazal enacted the mitzvah of reading Megillah, right? It's considered, although it's in Tanakh, but it's considered rabbinic. Reading Megillah is drabanan. Mordechai is also drabanan. So when Chazal were masakein, that were mechuyev to read Megillah, there are actually two different aspects that we are fulfilling by reading Megillah. There are two things we're accomplishing. Two mitzvos are in Mikra Megillah. Aspect number one is Pirsume Nisa, which is similar to Hanukkah. We're publicly describing the miracles that Hashem did for us. We read the Megillah, we're mefarsem the nes, just as when we light Hanukkah candles, we are mefarsem the nes. So one kiyum of Mikra Megillah is Pirsume Nisa. But there's another aspect of Mikra Megillah, and that is, it is also a fulfillment of remembering the evil of Amalek, Zechiras Amalek. Remember that Haman is from Agag. Agag was the king of Amalek that Shaul was supposed to kill. And Shaul had rachamim on Agag, and Agag had a brief time of freedom. And during that time, he impregnated a woman who became the ancestor of Haman. Shmuel killed Agag, but the pregnant woman was not identified, and Haman came from Agag. Haman is Amalek. And when we talk about the destruction of Haman, we are actually fulfilling the mitzvah of remembering Amalek and eradicating the memory of Amalek. That interesting contradiction. Remember to eradicate their memory. Don't forget to forget about them. Again, it's interesting definition of the mitzvah. So it turns out Mikra Megillah is really two mitzvos in one, rabbinically. Mikra Megillah is Pirsume Nes. Mikra Megillah is Zechiras Amalek. And even though we did fulfill Parshat Zachor, the Shabbos before Purim, but Chazal also, by enacting Megillah, actually incorporated another aspect of remembering Amalek through the Mitzvah Megillah. Now, are women chayavos in the mitzvah of remembering Amalek? Now, you probably think yes, because when it comes to Parshat Zohar, which is the mitzvah to remember Amalek, women have special minyanim and everything else. But the truth of the matter is, the Sefer HaChinuch says, women are not chayavos in the mitzvah of remembering Amalek. Why would that be so? It's not Zman Grama. It's not Zman Grama. Why would a woman be patur in the mitzvah of remembering Amalek? So the Sefer HaChinuch says the following. The Torah wants you to remember Amalek so you will wage war against them and wipe them out. Meaning, remembering Amalek is connected to the mitzvah to destroy Amalek. Women are not obligated to physically destroy an enemy because that's an aspect of combat. And women are excluded from milchama. Right, that's for sure. A woman is not allowed to even participate in combat. So the Sefer HaChinuch argues, since the purpose of remembrance is to fulfill the mitzvah of eradication, women who don't have the mitzvah of eradication don't have the mitzvah of zechira. Which means, according to the Sefer HaChinuch at least, women do not have to hear Parshat Zohar, although our custom is to be makmir. But women are exempt from Parshat Zohar. So now, says the Marcheshes, the following chiddush. If women are chayaves in Megillah reading, it is only because of the Persumei Nisa aspect, and that's the Lashon. They too were in the miracle. It's not because of the Amalek aspect. Because women, the Bahag holds like the Sefer HaChinuch, women are exempt from Zechira. So yeah, is a woman chayav to hear Megillah? Yes. But a woman is chayaves only for one reason, and a man is chayav for two reasons. A man is chayav for Persumei Nisa and Zechiras Amalek. So the same principle that says, if I am patur from a mitzvah, I can't be motzi you. Right, that's well known, a guy, a katan. We also say, if I'm only chayav in one aspect of a mitzvah and not the other aspect, I can't be motzi a person that is chayav in both aspects. Because legabe, the second aspect of Amalek, I am patur. Not I, the woman. The woman is patur. Therefore, the Bahag says, even though a woman is chayaves in Mikra Megillah, that's only because of Persumei Nisa, not because of Amalek. The man's chiyuv is even Amalek as well as Persumei Nisa. So since legabe Amalek, the woman is not mechuyeves b'davar, she cannot be mitzi a man in that obligation. Now, what about Kol Yisrael HaRav Zelazeh? Why can't you do it for that reason? So again, both like the Dogel Mervava and like Rabbi Akiva Eiger, you have an answer. Like the Dogel Mervava, who learns in the Rush, Nashim don't have arvus for men. And like Rabbi Akiva Eiger, there's no arvus on a mitzvah that the person is patur from. So if the woman is patur from Zechiras Amalek, like the Sefer HaChinuch, she has no Kol Yisrael HaRav Zelazeh to be sure that a man does it. Meaning, either like the Dogel Mervava or Rabbi Akiva Eiger, once the woman is patur, you're not going to be able to invoke Kol Yisrael HaRav Zelazeh to let her do it for the man, right? So this is a brilliant explanation of why the Bahag says a woman cannot read Megillah for a man, even if she wasn't Yotze yet, because her chiyuv is only Persumei Nisa, her chiyuv is not Zechiras Amalek, because the Bahag follows the opinion of the Sefer HaChinuch, who says that Zechiras Amalek only applies when you have a mitzvah to eradicate Amalek. Women do not have a mitzvah to eradicate Amalek because that is milchama, and therefore the Sefer HaChinuch concludes women are not chayavas in Zechiras Amalek, therefore their obligation in Megillah is only aspect 1, not aspect 2, and somebody who only has aspect 1 cannot be mitzi someone who's chayav in 1 and 2, and arvus is not going to work either because of the Dogel Mervava's understanding of the Rush ein arvus benashim, or because of Rabbi Akiva Eiger's yesod of the Rush, that if you're potter from a mitzvah, you have no arvus to help another person.
You said before that the women were exempt in combat.
Yep.
Yehudis technically part of combat.
Well, you are correct. We do have not only the story of Yehudis, which is a Hanukkah story, but in Tanakh itself, Yael actually, killed a general of Sisera. The short answer is we certainly do have women who heroically killed Rishayim, but they had no obligation to do that, meaning they're not Benos Muhammad, they are exempt from combat. So Yehudis was not part of the army, Yael was not part of an army, etc. But Ein Chinami, there were Yechidim that did act. Yeah.
So in the case of like Mikra Megillah, you have an action that really is two mitzvahs, at least for a man. So if we agree that a woman cannot, she's not Hiyuv in remembering a Amalek.
Yep.
But she's Hiyuv in pursuing Nisi.
Yeah.
So she gets that if she does the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah. How come if she does it for a man, he doesn't get like that part of it? Meaning, what if a woman did it for a man, and would you not say he gets that, and then he could remember on that in another way?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. But I would say this: when the Chachamim created the mitzvah of Mikra Megillah, they defined the mitzvah that it has to contain a package of two components. It's not just two separate mitzvahs in which I do one without the other. They said Mikra Megillah requires that you incorporate two mitzvahs. So if you only get one mitzvah, you have zero, meaning it doesn't count as a valid mitzvah of Megillah until it has the double package. Yeah.
When the Rock asks Devorah to lead the army, he's asking her to lead it and not inherit the army?
Well, for sure that's the case. Devorah was not Joan of Arc. She did not, fight in combat. She was more of the spiritual leader. And the truth of the matter is, Devorah Bichlal is a very, very, we'll eventually get to it, I hope. It's a very extreme case because, number one, even without the war, Devorah was a judge. And a dayan, a shofetes. And normally a woman is puzzled to be a shofetes, so how could Devorah do that? So obviously this was a very, very unique case. Maybe it's Haras Shah, an emergency situation, and the like, yeah.
Rav mentioned something about maybe the woman still being able to...
Yeah, so now I want to mention the Marcheshes' fascinating chiddush. The Marcheshes brings different makoros that the obligation to wage war against the 7 nations and Amalek is only a daytime obligation. It's not a nighttime obligation. We don't wage war at night, unless we're attacked, of course. But the chiyuv to go out and kill Amalek only applies in daytime hours, because nighttime hours you're supposed to learn. So Memela, the Marcheshes makes the following connection. If there's no war against Amalek at night, and if we go with the Sefer HaChinuch, that the mitzvah of remembrance is connected to war, that would mean there's no mitzvah to remember Amalek at night. So it turns out that the definition of Mikra Megillah at night is only a Pirsumei Nisa fulfillment, and not a Zechiras Amalek fulfillment. Since on the Pirsumei Nisa level, men and women are equal, so the Marcheshes wants to be Machadesh that even like the Baal Hilchos Gedolos, a woman could be motzi a man at nighttime regular reading, even though a woman could not be motzi a man on daytime regular reading. Now, you got to be careful when you're talking to a Haredi audience or Haredi yeshiva, so someone's going to quote me or the tape. Right, Breitowitz says, it's okay for women to read Megillah for men. So you're going to bring your sister here Purim night, and she'll read Megillah to the yeshiva. That's not going to happen. So again, we're not addressing a whole bunch of other issues. I'm not addressing Kol Isha. I'm not addressing Mechitza. I'm not addressing Tznius. Of course, those are going to be issues. We're focusing on maybe a narrow case of a wife for a husband. Okay, no problem, right? A husband is allowed to hear his wife sing. So all I'm saying is, so the Marcheshes is Mechadesh, right, in such an oifen, that the problem the Bahag has is only the Kriyas HaMegillah in the day and not the Kriyas HaMegillah at night. Now, the truth of the matter is, that extension is a little questionable. First of all, the Bahag doesn't say it. If there is such a chiluk, the Bahag himself should have said that the problem is only in the day. But second of all, the argument that because you don't wage war at night, therefore there's no zechira at night, that's not necessarily ironclad logic. Because one could say that even if you go with the idea that the purpose of remembrance is to wage war, but maybe you always need to remember in order to wage war in the day. Meaning, in order to wage war in the day, you got to think about the enemy even at night. Meaning, to say that you're exempt from zechira because it's not a zman milchama, that itself does not follow. But this was the cheshbon that the Marcheshes made. So according to the Marcheshes, even the Baal Hilchos Gedolos would actually say that a woman could read Megillah for a man at night. Now, what if the woman was already Yotzei? So at that point, you get back to the machlokas of yesterday between the Dogol Mervava and Rabbi Akiva Eger. According to the Dogol Mervava, Ein Arvus Benashim, so once the woman was Yotzei, she could not read it for her husband. And according to Rabbi Akiva Eger, since at night she does have this chiyuv, even though she was Yotzei, there would be Arvus, right? So that's if you already heard Megillah, that would be the same machlokas we discussed yesterday. If she didn't hear Megillah, so the Marcheshes learns that even like the Bahag, for sure she could read it at night, not during the day. But as I say, not everybody agrees with the Bahag. There are many shittas that say even during the day the woman could read it because you don't subdivide it into these two components. Okay, so this is again a very, very interesting mahalech in terms of subdividing Mikra Megillah into two different chiyuvim. Some want to use it, some want to give, actually the Marcheshes himself actually gives another way of splitting it. The two splits, or the split that he had said so far was Pirsume Nisa and Amalek. But he then splits it another way. The Gemara asks Akasha, why don't we say Hallel on Purim? Right, Chanukah's coming up. We're going to say a full Hallel for 8 days for the miracles of Chanukah, the wars of Chanukah. And by the way, just to be sure you understand this, the Hallel of Chanukah, like if I were to ask you, why do we say Hallel on Chanukah? And you might be likely to give me the story of the oil that was supposed to burn 1 day and burned 8 days. And that is a miracle that happened, but that's not why you say Hallel on Chanukah. You say Hallel on Chanukah because the Jewish people were saved from an enemy that wanted to destroy them spiritually and created a war. In other words, the Hallel of Chanukah is not on the miracle of the oil, although such a miracle, of course, occurred. The Hallel of Chanukah is on the Nitzachon in war against an enemy that tried to destroy us spiritually, primarily. It's important to know that. The Maharal writes, you don't make Hallel just because God did a miracle. I mean, the nace of the Pach Hashemin is a wonderful miracle. But Hallel is always connected to miracles that are matzil Klal Yisrael, not stam miracles. So the Gemara asks, if we say Hallel because of the miracles of Chanukah, then why don't I say Hallel for Purim? HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved us, Purim, right? The Gezerah of Purim, Haman wanted to kill every single Jew. So the Gemara actually gives 3 answers why we don't say Hallel on Purim. Answer number 1 is the reading of the Megillah is a fulfillment of Hallel. We do say Hallel on Purim, but we say Hallel by reading the Megillah. Reading the Megillah is Hallel. We're praising Hashem for what Hashem did. Ad Kedei Kach, that there's a shita of the Meiri who actually says that if you're on a desert island and you're stranded on Purim and you don't have a Megillah with you, but you have a sitter, you should actually read Hallel with a bracha, because you're chayiv in Hallel, but Megillah takes the place of Hallel. If I don't have a Megillah, I got to read Hallel. That's the Meiri Shita. Okay, that's one answer. The second answer the Gemara gives is, we don't say Hallel on miracles that take place outside of Eretz Yisrael. Unlike the Hanukkah story, in which the victory took place in Eretz Yisrael, the Purim story took place outside of Eretz Yisrael. We don't say Hallel on miracles outside of Eretz Yisrael. So you might be thinking right away, what about the Hallel of Pesach? The Hallel of Pesach is to commemorate Yitzias Mitzrayim. That happened outside of Eretz Yisrael, right? So if you don't say Hallel on Purim, because you don't say Hallel on Einei Shebechutz La'aretz, why do you say Hallel on Pesach? So the Gemara's answer is, until we came to Eretz Yisrael, meaning Pesach was on the way, until we come to Eretz Yisrael, then even miracles in Chutz La'aretz could create the Hallel. But by the Purim story, we had been in Eretz Yisrael and we had been exiled. At that point, we don't say Hallel when we're for Golus miracles, right? Yitzias Mitzrayim was before we came to Eretz Yisrael. The Purim story is the Golus from Eretz Yisrael. That's Ein Omrim Hallel Al Neis Shebechutz La'aretz. That's answer number 2. Answer number 3 is very interesting. It says, we only say Hallel when as a result of the miracle we're out of danger. By Hanukkah, we defeated the Yevanim and we established an independent government. The enemy is no more. By contrast, in the story of Purim, even after we defeated Haman, we were still in a state of subjugation to Achashverosh. And that means the next day some other guy might become prime minister, meaning you're not out of the water yet. You're in the same situation of potential danger. And that's why we don't say Hallel. So we have 3 reasons why we don't say Hallel on Purim. One is Megillah is the Hallel. Number 2, we don't say Hallel on miracles that happen in Chutz La'aretz. And number 3, we were still slaves of Achashverosh. Now, of those 3 reasons, we actually paskin, the Shulchan Aruch actually paskins reason number 1, meaning Megillah is Hallel. So now the Marcheshus applies the same analytical logic to this idea, that maybe the 2 components of Megillah are Persumei Nisa and Kriyas Hallel. In other words, this is just cutting it a different way. Instead of saying Amalek and Persumei Nisa, it's Hallel and Persumei Nisa. Okay? So then he says, women are in fact patur from Hallel. He says they could do it optionally, but Hallel is a mitzvah tasei shezman garama. That's not one of the exceptions. So once again, we're back to the same story. When a man reads Megillah, he's Makayim 2 things. He is Makayim Hallel of Purim, and he's Makayim Persumei Nisa. When the woman reads Megillah, she's only Makayim Persumei Nisa because she's patur from Hallel. Now here, he also wants to come up with the night distinction because he points out that normally we don't say Hallel at night. The only time we say Hallel at night is Leil Seder, which is a special thing, but normally Hallel is not a mitzvah at night. Ergo, the Megillah reading at night, it's mamish the same vort, except he's just substituting. Instead of Amalek, he's focusing on Hallel as the other component, and he'll come to the same conclusion. It really doesn't change anything, it's just 2 different ways of describing it, that a woman at night could read Megillah for a man. Yeah.
Why don't we say a man is Yotzei 3 mitzvahs, that is Hallel, Sumenes, and Zachor Amalek?
You could say that. Yeah, you're right. In point of fact, it's fine. You can certainly say that because all the conclusions are going to be the same. That of the 3 components, a woman only has 1 of them, and the man has 2 or 3 of them. And in the day, at night, the man also only has one of them, right? So that's kind of the overall structure, right? So this was the Marcheshes. It's interesting, just as a little aside, the Marcheshes wrote I think the Sefer was from the 20s or maybe early 30s. It was before the Holocaust when he published. But at the time, Rav Chaim's derech, Rav Chaim Brisker's derech of limud, which was kind of a new analytical derech of learning, was conquering the yeshiva world. It became, like to this day, although there are many variations and it's hard to be magdir, very few people, except maybe in Brisk, and even then, have the pure Brisker derech. But to this day, virtually all advanced yeshiva learning, and at least in non-Hasidic yeshivas, is really based on Rav Chaim. One cannot believe the influence of Rav Chaim Soloveitchik on the derech of limud of all advanced yeshiva learning. Rav Chaim was nifter in 1917 or 1918, so it's been a while. And he was like the one whose derech conquered the derech of Ian. By the way, my own Rosh Hashiva, Rav Ruderman, I remember in his office, he had, it's probably still there with Rav Feldman, I don't know, he had a huge picture, like a full body picture of Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. And I always remember the eyes. It's one of those eyes, it feels like he's looking straight at you. In fact, they say Rav Chaim's eyes were so piercing, people were afraid. He wore glasses, even though he didn't need glasses. The glasses just had plain glass in them. So to cover up his eyes because it was like scary. But whatever it is, but Rav Ruderman mentioned, although Rav Chaim was the nicest person actually, he was not a scary person at all, but he had a certain appearance that frightened you a little bit. The story goes, Rav Ruderman used to say that when he was 9 years old, he was already like an Eloi, like brilliant. So he was taken in to meet Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, the great Rav of Brisk, the Gadol Hador. And in the middle of, Rav Chaim, gave him a little bechina, whatever it would be. And in the middle, somebody came in, they needed to talk to Rav Chaim about a very important matter of chinuch and education. So Rav Ruderman, the 9-year-old, was going to leave the room. Rav Chaim said, "No, you can sit. It's fine. You can sit." And this little boy, just stayed in Rav Chaim's meeting with this person. And Rav Ruderman said what he heard as a 9-year-old from Rav Chaim gave him hadracha and eitzos in how to run a yeshiva all of his life. He says he remembered kind of eavesdropping on that meeting. It's almost as if Rav Chaim, and maybe Rav Chaim had Ruach HaKodesh, that this little boy is going to start a yeshiva. And this was a discussion about how do you run a yeshiva. And he wanted the 9-year-old to hear. And Rav Ruderman says he remembers the conversation, and it guided him in making decisions throughout his life. So I'm bringing this up because Rav Chaim's derech conquered all of the yeshiva world like a storm, like a tsunami. But there were many lamdanim who were like a pre-Rav Chaim derech. And the Marcheshes was one of them. And the Marcheshes apologizes in his Hakdama. He says he knows he is naked of the golden garments of light that have been introduced into the world of yeshivas, and he is from the old-fashioned, I'm not sure if it was sarcastic or not, it's not clear. He says he knows he's one of the old-fashioned lamdanim that have not necessarily followed the brisker ways, but he hopes that his words will still have meaning, even in these newfangled times with new derachim of learning. So he actually has this kind of almost an apology for not being a brisker in his orientation. Okay, maybe we'll stop here. Okay, take care. So Mr. Shams, next week, back to Sefer Yoshua. We're going to go to the next prakim, next subject. Okay.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.